Yesterday, I posted a video that was about what's going on Native American land, primarily in South Dakota. And it's talking about the crime and everything that's going on there, specifically related to drugs and things like that. Because one of the tribes declared a state of emergency. Well, after I posted that video, a person that I've known for quite a while on Facebook came to me and said, "Hey, um, he said he was listening to my story on the Nome Sioux conflict. He knew a lot about Native America and the challenges and problems that face them, and he was wanting to weigh in, but he had a few observations. Now, this is someone who has worked with folks that are part of these tribes. He gave me some excellent points, and I'm going to cover it. Plus, what I'm going to do in the process is also give some background clips from different sources. Not many, I've only got like 4 videos that I'm going to attach to this, but we're going to get in depth in what Nicholas had to say on this. Um, so, and I want to hear you weigh in. I really do. I want to hear a little bit more of what you think when it comes to what's going on native land. And this is something that I have heard through the years. I've known people that were part of the Eastern Band Cherokee. I've known folks that were part of other native tribes. And each group has a different look. And I mean, I'm from Tennessee, so I'm from close to where the Trail of Tears started. Trail of Tears is a important thing. Something that Andrew Jackson. It's the reason why I dislike him as a president. He did some good things, but what he did with the Native Americans was horrible. And then how we treated natives over the years have been horrible. So let's get into what he had to say, and then I'm going to show a couple of clips. But I'm going to say I'm going to break it down because he broke his points down. So get let's start this. Howdy, y'all. This is Paul, the Redneck Thinker. What we have here is a channel to communicate. I want you folks to be thinking by the time you leave my videos. Why? Because I'm tired of people talking via what other people tell them to think. So, watch my video and enjoy the chance to think for yourself. Okay, so his first 3 points. Nothing is new regarding hard drugs and violence. This has been a problem ever since the natives were exiled to their de facto concentration camps slash reservations. And I agree with him about that. Some of these reservations, the American government holds like 55 million acres of land that is, they say is native land, but they're keeping the best, and they gave, and the land that they put the native tribes on are some nasty stuff. Two, the relationship between any nation, tribe, and Washington is one of, at the very least, complete distrust. It is not at all the desire of many natives to invite more feds onto their land. Three, tribal governments are fractured. In the Sioux bands, hereditary chiefs war with elected councils, and whenever the majority decides the chief council is wrong, they switch loyalties to the council chief. Okay, so you heard that. These lands, I mean, you're talking about a long history of stupidity, and it really has been. They try to take away the culture, the religion of the Native Americans, and you're going to hear that in the first clip. I've got a second clip that I'm also going to bring in that is from John Stossel, and it's how the government turns American Indians into freeloaders. That is what John Stossel's words, not mine. But I want you to listen to both of these clips, and it shows you why there's going to be distrust. And so let's get these two videos. There's a little bit of time here, but I really think it will help educate you on this topic.
The federal government says it wants to bring attention to thousands of murdered or missing Native women and children, but a long history of broken promises have many Native Americans questioning whether they can be trusted.
One thing I remember as a child was that we were taught to hide, and she was so afraid that someone, the government or whoever the powers to be, were going to come and grab us.
Ron Yob grew up in this small home in downtown Grand Rapids in the 60s. Before he even learned how to walk, his mother, Angeline Kelsey, taught him and his siblings to be prepared if a person in uniform showed up at their door.
So it just struck fear in us when people would knock on the door. There was a lot of paranoia. I don't think that paranoia ever left me.
Kelsey was one of thousands of children forcibly taken from their homes and sent to more than 300 boarding schools across the country.
She was taken away, and that traumatic experience existed still in their mind like 30 years later. You got to remember, at that time they were still trying to quote-unquote civilize the Indians.
Yob says his mother and her brother were taken from their family in the 1930s. She was 5 years old. They were taken to Holy Childhood in Harbor Springs, nearly 200 miles north of Grand Rapids.
Taken 100 miles away and was told to forget about her family, We're going to take the Indian out of you now, and we're going to take that language away from you. We're going to take any of your cultural things away from you.
Native American groups have record of thousands of tribal children who were taken away from their families.
There were places where Native American children were, forcibly or coercively institutionalized, but there were other locations where some Native American children were able to stay home.
The idea of, quote, Americanizing Indians began in the 1800s. By the 1920s, up to 85% of all Native American children were forced to assimilate.
Quite infamously, the phrase "kill the Indian, save the man" was said by General Richard Henry Pratt, the founder of the Carlisle Indian School, the first Native American boarding school of its kind, and really the flagship model.
At Indian boarding schools, students were prevented from speaking anything other than English.
Native children who spoke their tribal languages rather than English would receive poison placed on their tongues to burn their tongues. There was rampant sexual and physical abuse for identifying in any sort of way with their cultural practices, including language or spirituality, but also with just breaking the rules.
Students went missing. It is unknown how many.
If you go to many of these schools, you'll see children's cemeteries, which is actually a huge issue today as tribes are making the effort to repatriate some of those remains. And as they're going through that process, they're finding that a lot of the graves, are unmarked.
Government funding for the schools began to dwindle after World War I, causing most of them to close by the 1920s. But some, like Holy Childhood, stayed open until the early 80s.
I went to Holy Childhood in Harbor Springs, Michigan. I was 6 years old.
Many, like Philip Cantu, say they had a great experience during their time in boarding school and chose not to return home.
I learned a lot. You learn about brushing your teeth and keeping clean, sitting up straight, doing your homework, things that, after I got out of 8th grade that I knew when I went to high school, it was nothing new to me.
His school was part of a military-structured system, meaning the curriculum focused more on teaching trades and less on academics.
For women, it was being a domestic worker most often. For men, it was some type of manual labor.
It caused a generation to lose any kind of cultural traits they had, because your cultural traits are developed by the environment you're raised in.
As a teacher for more than 30 years, Yob says he's seen the long-lasting impacts boarding schools have had on his community.
They didn't trust the police. They didn't trust the principals. They didn't trust the counselors. They didn't trust the social workers. They had no respect for them. And when it started boiling down to, these kids didn't even respect themselves.
Trust and respect. Two concepts he and Cantu hope the new Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Initiative and Task Force will eventually earn.
Well, it's got to do positive things for people because it's bringing an awareness that was denied before.
No group in America has been helped more by government than American Indians. And yet, some politicians still tell Indians things like this.
Few have been ignored by Washington for as long as Native Americans.
Ignored? Are you kidding me? Look at the signs around this Sioux reservation in South Dakota. Our government has made Indian tribes wards of our state. Government manages their land, provides their health care, their schools, gives them food stamps, pays for housing, child care, even burial assistance. The result?
There is a stunning poverty here. Only 1 in 4 has a job. There is a scarcity of phones, not even any banks.
Indians have the highest poverty rate and lowest life expectancy of any group in America. So the Sioux told us they need more handouts.
The government should be giving the Indian people more appropriations so that we could exist out here still.
I really feel Obama's administration needs to get up to the plate and deal with it.
Because white people stole the Indians' land hundreds of years ago, the government signed treaties. And that's why Washington sends billions of dollars to Indian tribes every year.
Everybody thinks the government owes them something.
It's odd in that no group has been more helped by government than the American Indians, and no group does worse.
Maybe it's the government.
Ben Chavis is a member of a tribe that doesn't get special government help. And yet,
the area where you live looks different from Indian reservations.
There's mansions. They look like English manors. I can take you to one neighborhood where my people are from and show you nicer homes than the whole Sioux reservation.
And this is not casino money, no special deal for your tribe.
Oh, no. In my tribe, we don't have any casinos. We have 12 banks.
Chavis says his tribe does well because the federal government does not recognize them as a sovereign tribe, though their congressman wants to change that.
It's time for discrimination to end and recognition to begin.
Old Mike knows if he wants to stay in Washington, D.C., he has to support the Lumbees or he won't be there.
This is an injustice that, yes, must finally be resolved.
If the congressman gets his way, your tribe would just get $80 million. It's tough to say no to that.
If you want to become dependent on the government and sell your soul for $80 million, I understand that. And some people are willing to do that.
Indian activists like lawyer Elizabeth Homer say the Lumbees ought to get federal recognition. Homer used to be the U.S. Interior Department's Director of American Indian Trusts.
Well, the Lumbees have been neglected and left out of the system and have been petitioning for 100 years for their recognition, for which they're entitled, by the way.
They're petitioning because socialists like you have convinced them to do that.
Socialist
but
now.
They do better without the government.
If I'm a socialist, what does that make you?
It makes me and Ben Chavis capitalists. And capitalist Indians achieve.
Your Indians are thriving.
Our Indians are working.
The Scott brothers built a company that now employs 16 people, putting up power lines. They didn't get any government help.
It made me drive twice as hard, knowing that they wouldn't help us and all. It panned out pretty good for us.
We've just always been hard workers. So that's what that is.
This Lumbee tribe member, Lindsay Locklear, runs one of the biggest True Value hardware stores in the country.
The day after I graduated, the next day I was at work.
The Lumbees are doing well.
Tremendous survivors. A great example of how you can continue to persist under absolutely the worst treatment that you could hope to get.
They do well because they've divorced themselves from these government handouts. They've done well.
Individuals have done well.
Exactly.
Individuals free of special government protection, like Lumbee Jim Thomas, a real estate developer who used to own the Sacramento Kings, Jack Lowry, an original owner of the Cracker Barrel restaurants, or Sybil Bullard, who owns J.R. Jones Grain.
We had to fend for ourselves. We had to do what we needed to do to survive. We don't mind getting our hands dirty and getting the job done because we know that if we do, we will be rewarded for that.
What helped the Lumbees, said Ben, was knowing that they had to become entrepreneurs and support themselves.
On the reservations, they haven't trained to be capitalists. They've been trained to be communists. Everything you need someone's approval.
Tribal governments and the Bureau of Indian Affairs manage most Indian land in America. Indians often compete to serve on tribal councils because then they can give out the government's money.
You can help your relatives. You can help your girlfriend. You can help your girlfriend's mama. It's a great program.
Not so great for the majority of Indians. Because the government owns most Indian property, individuals rarely build nice homes or businesses.
No individual on the reservation owns the land, so they can't do anything with it. They can't develop it. Let's look at my tribe. We have title and deeds to our land. That's the secret. I raise cattle, Red Angus cattle. I can do what I want to because it's my private property. My buddy on the White Mountain Apache Reservation, he has a farm, but he can't do the same things I can do. If the tribe decided one day, we want to take your land on the reservation and give it to one of my relatives, they could do that.
Government handouts don't work well even for the freeloaders. But there are always enablers who say, yes, they will.
American Indians own more land than any group in America, and you are still the poorest group. How can that be?
Indian reservations are basically in areas that have been neglected by the United States. The tribes have been located in some of the most isolated areas geographically.
So what? Other isolated groups have done well.
How come the Mormons got rich? Where they lived, it's just as poor. How come the Amish got wealthy, even rejecting modern tools?
I don't know how wealthy the Amish are, and I don't know how the Mormons got rich.
Maybe because they weren't relying on government rules and Indian trusts and all your lawyering that teaches Indians to be helpless?
Oh my goodness, I don't think that that's true at all. I take umbrage at that, sir.
What you're really saying is Indians are too dumb to manage their own land, so the government has to be, papa and take care of us. We don't need the government giving us handouts.
There is no Bureau of Irish Affairs or Latino Affairs. Why is there a Bureau of Indian Affairs?
We are a starved people in a rich nation.
Already we've got the Empowering Tribal Nations Initiative, the Advancing Nation-to-Nation Relationships, Protecting Indian Country, Tribal Priority Allocations, Indian Land Consolidation Program. All these government programs. Indians are poor.
Indians are poor.
Die young.
And that's why these programs are so important.
But maybe these programs are why Indians are poor.
Well, I don't think that that's a fair thing to say. In fact, I think that they are the most neglected of any population in the United States.
Government needs to do more.
Yeah.
And every freeloader wants more.
We get welfare checks, we get grant checks, we get food stamps, but if you look at these farmers and ranchers, they get the same thing. That's what these subsidy payments are for.
It is true that subsidies also go to farmers and ranchers and big companies. But just like the gifts given these people, subsidies keep you dependent. The handouts certainly haven't helped America's Indians.
We got all kind of Indian programs in America. The homeless program, the stimulus packet. It's all welfare. It's all a con.
Speaking of cons.
This isn't the only time I've freeloaded. Next, we'll show you how the biggest freeloaders are rich people like me.
You heard all of that, and it's some in-depth look at what's going on. It's nasty. So here's some more from my friend Nicholas. Everyone knows each other. How can they rely on a father or mother to turn in their drug-dealing, abusive son, especially if they blame themselves for failing to raise their kids because they were too abused and did drugs? They too were abused and did drugs. Pardon. 5. I suspect the cartels are not the issue, other than maybe getting some supply, because everyone knows each other Illegals who are not welcome any more than feds on their lands can't hide. However, of course, drug dealers will make deals with suppliers, and the cartels are an obvious choice. Now, you heard that. And I've got two more clips, last two clips. One is Montana tribal leaders talking with Merrick Garland to fight the cartels. And the next clip is Native Americans have historically battled addiction and how it could be getting worse. So we're going to talk about these addictions. And I want you to listen to this as well. All of this I found because I thought it was very informative in getting people an idea of what's going on when it comes to addiction and Native Americans, which started out with alcohol. You take a look at what the Department of Interior Indian agents did. Indian agents were horrible. They were constantly trying to scam the Native Americans so that they could profit off of the horrible conditions that they were living in. I mean, we're talking, they were giving rancid food to the tribes, things like that. So let's hear these two clips real quick.
You can see the convoy of dark SUVs behind me. They are with U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, who spent much of his time Tuesday in Montana on the Crow Reservation, touring and discussing the drug cartel activity.
I grew up in Lodge Grass.
The Crow Reservation has been all Levi Black Eagle has known his entire life.
It was Pleasantville when I lived there. We could walk around. You didn't have to worry about anything. You could leave your doors unlocked.
But now, as Secretary of the Crow Tribe, he's fighting on the front line in the war against drugs.
Cartels are things you watch in the movies, you read about on the news. It's not something you expect to happen in your own backyard.
Driving through the reservation, Black Eagle says you can see the impacts: boarded up buildings, graffiti, and high crime rates as the cartel targets poverty-stricken areas with vulnerable people by peddling drugs trafficked here from Mexico.
The sad thing is that on our reservation or in some of our communities, it's easier to buy drugs than it is groceries, which it doesn't make any sense. It's sad.
Fentanyl use, meth use, and the users are becoming younger and younger.
And Crow Tribal Chairman Frank Whiteclay says there's a ripple effect.
Human trafficking and missing and murdered Indigenous people.
Black Eagle and Whiteclay were both in a closed-door meeting with the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland Tuesday morning on the reservation.
It's going to take a community effort, and it's not going to be one thing that's going to solve this problem. It's going to be, you have to attack it from many different aspects.
The quickest fix tribal members can think of to combat the cartel: more resources for the reservation.
They do set up shop in reservations because it's kind of a safe haven, especially with limited law enforcement.
At any given time, we have 2 police officers patrolling an area the size of Connecticut, 2.5 million acres. I know there's a lot of jurisdictional issues and there's a lot of it's dicey a little bit to have outsiders come into our sovereign land and help with the law enforcement, but it's desperately needed because the BIA is severely undermanned.
It won't be a quick fix or an easy battle, but it's one tribal members are willing to take to protect everyone at risk of being targeted by the drug cartel. In Crow Agency, Haley Monaco, MTN News.
We have not seen anything like this. We've dealt with alcohol addiction since alcohol was introduced to us. This is that times 1,000 times.
As the drug crisis sweeps the country, one of the groups hit the hardest is Native Americans. And the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians is no exception. Of tribe chairperson Aaron Payment's 16 siblings, almost all have battled addiction.
I have a sister right now that's in jail. She's been in jail, she's in her early 40s. She's been in jail 70% of her adult life because of her addiction. And then my other brother's living on the street right now. And my brother died in January. And so it goes.
The Native American community has historically battled addiction, and they say it's not only still a problem, but it's worse. The deck has seemed to be stacked against them as experts discuss whether the problem is more genetic or environmental. But what it seems to come down to for many Native Americans, those directly affected, is the historical trauma of being forced out of their culture and identity and a broken promise. Many aspects of Native American religions were banned until 1978 when the American Indian Religious Freedom Act was passed.
One of the root causes of suffering for our people is that we didn't have the ability to know or engage in our culture and our ceremonies that we had historically, lived on.
The Centers for Disease Control say fatal drug overdoses in the Native American community saw a 500% increase between 1999 and 2015. Cosley says when she was younger, alcohol was the community's main addiction.
I was impacted with addiction problems at a young age. I was removed from the home. My parents were young parents with alcoholism.
But the substance of choice has evolved, and it's deadlier.
Now, moving forward to today, the opiate addiction, it just kills people.
The physician practices coupled with the pharmaceuticals preying on that have promoted the use of drugs, prescription drugs.
Payment largely blames the overprescribing and rise of opioids into the community on the pharmaceutical companies. And to fight back, he says they have joined a growing list of tribes exploring filing suit against the opioid manufacturers. But the tribes still face an uphill battle in overcoming the crisis.
It's not surprising to me that there's an overuse of painkillers on Indian reservations, because I think the quality of medical care that's offered is so far below what is necessary and needed.
Health services are provided for all members of federally recognized tribes through a government agreement. It's not a handout, but a promise given to Native Americans. And it's one they haven't forgotten.
So we don't receive what we receive because of reparations. We receive the funding we get and judicial precedents because of the treaties. And the treaties were signed consistent with the United States Constitution. So they're legal tender. However, the federal government is fulfilling that obligation, but they're only scratching the surface.
The Sioux tribe has 4 health centers serving 16,000 tribal members. But the tribe's health director says the funding they receive is only about 40% of what's needed. But the underfunding experienced locally by the Sioux represents a national and systemic problem throughout Indian country. In 1928, a report found a lack of funding and inadequate health care for Native Americans, whose health was designated as bad. Since then, report after report has been published by different groups and agencies, usually finding the same major problems but also issues in policies, or the lack thereof, when it comes to opioid prescribing and pain management.
The Indian Health Service seems impervious to improvement.
Basically, the problems a century ago are still problems today. But the Native American community has hope that things could change. And Congress has also appropriated over $50 million to specifically address the crisis for Native Americans. And Payment says more is expected in the next budget, though so far it's not enough. In the meantime, the Sioux tribe is going to do what they can to fight the epidemic on their own.
If we're going to heal people, that we can't wait for federal dollars for treatment services. So we're in the planning stages of building our own treatment facility. The solutions to our challenges is to bring our culture back and to pray for that direction and to listen to our ancestors and to fulfill our duty and responsibility for our future generations.
Okay, so now you're a little bit better informed as to what's going on with the tribes when it comes to addiction, law enforcement, and everything. So point 6 and 7. The jurisdictions between tribe, state, fed law enforcement are odd. So there are tribal police, tribal law enforcement, locally sourced, BIA police, Bureau of Indian Affairs, federally sponsored, and these two groups only have jurisdictions on tribal lands. State police, which do not have jurisdiction on tribal lands, and feds, who have jurisdiction but only if crimes are committed across borders, federal crimes. Yes, these borders can be between states' reservations. So, this jurisdictional headache mounted with the distrust, and this has been covered quite well in several shows, and I have to admit, I've seen some shows that have really gone out of their way to research this. This is a concern, but it also is a simple fact of that Native people have a problem with federal government and local government overstepping. I mean, you take a look at the willingness of many state agencies to take children from native land and put them into white homes. That's not good. Not good for tribal identity. It's not good for these native children actually understanding where they come from. And then 7, tribes are known to exile drug dealers, people that do bad things to others of an intimate nature, bad apples from their national lands. As all natives are U.S. citizens, if, let's say, Standing Rock Sioux folks think Johnny sells smack, needs to GTFO, they can strip his tribal citizenship and ban him from the res. Another point that he puts in here, now, just because tribes can do a good job of keeping illegals, cartels, etc. out, doesn't mean that Nome isn't right. Natives, like black people or any other group, are not monolithic. They are all humans, and addiction and greed affect some of every population, and that's something right there. Now, he did say he worked with Native community in Chicago for many years and heard many of these stories. And we got to talking, and he pointed out some movies that would be really interesting to watch. Indian Horse, it's a movie about residential schools. Res Dogs, a series, 2 seasons, which about the life of generic Oklahoma reservation. Great characters, good stories, dialogue. And a movie that crowns all of them about native life, Smoke Signals. Without this movie, Res Dog series probably wouldn't have happened. Watching these shows, movies will give you some idea of what life on Great Plains reservations are like, and also get a taste of native humor, which I think is pretty funny. In Res Dogs and Smoke Signals, the other 2 selections are not funny at all. Another movie that he brought up was Wind River. He said that it's grim and sad, but gives you a bit of perspective. Now, the last point he made during our conversation was reservations are like ghettos in the cities in this way. You can't come in from outside and hope to fix them. One way or another, they are going to have to fix themselves. You're talking about a community to clean themselves up, but the cost of taking out people, exiling them, or imprisoning family and gang/tribes protect their own, and all the adults feel guilty about what's going on with their kids. But since they grew up in crap, they don't know how to be good parents any more than their parents did. Drugs, of course, are the number one problem because it's fast money in communities with limited opportunity. Only chance for many is to move out, leaving the hopeless behind. So, read all that. I want you to tell me what you think of this. Do you think that my friend Nicholas had some good points? I think he did, but hey, I'm trying to get you to think. I want your opinion. What did you think of all this information? To me, it fueled even more what I want to do. One of the reasons why I started Redneck Thinker is as I get more focused and more and actually have money coming in so I can set up a proper setup, I want to interview folks of all kinds, but this would be an issue that I think needs more examination. I really do. I think that I think that it would be very nice to talk to folks. You know, I know folks from the Eastern Band, and those folks are amazing. Eastern Band Cherokee Indians. They own their land. They don't. Their land is not owned by the federal government. It's not federally mandated. They bought their land. And talking with them, and you saw earlier about the Lumbee tribe, but look at the difference between how they live versus how, say, the tribes in South Dakota live or Oklahoma. Now, the folks in Oklahoma, I've had friends of mine that are from there, and they talk highly about what they survived and how they enjoy what they've made there. And some folks in South Dakota, but if you're having to declare states of emergency like they have to keep doing in places like South Dakota reservations, it makes you wonder. So, tell me what you think. Seriously, this is a topic that I want to cover, and I want to hear what you have to say. This has been Paul, the Redneck Thinker. Y'all have a good day now. Bye. So, folks, that's the story that I wanted to bring you on this video. And I just wanted to say thank you again for coming by. Hit like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff if you don't mind. Help me out. So, y'all have a good day now. Bye.